This video is all going to be about the spiritual significance of hair. Different lengths of hair, having hair and not having hair, different hairstyles, how you tend to your hair, and how hair and spiritual significance can be found in different cultures. Before we continue on to the video, I want to talk about this amazing new AI tool called Legalese Decoder. This thing is super cool because you can take an entire legal document full of all of this legal jargon that you cannot understand, copy it and paste it, and it will translate it into plain English or any other language that you need to translate it into. Totally worth it, guys. There's a lot of different memberships available, and this thing is bomb for tax time, which we're still technically in, just as a sidebar. So definitely check it out. Go ahead and click on the link in the drop down menu below. See you on the other side. So I want to say as a disclaimer right off the bat that if your particular hairstyle is a reflection of your belief system or your culture, and what I have to say here doesn't line up with you, then I'm not saying that you should drop what you're doing and change your hair because of what I'm sharing. And I just want you guys to know that this is a personal perspective based on my personal experience and research I've done. So this should not and probably will not reflect everybody's view on hair. So I just want to put that out there right now. So definitely take what resonates and leave the rest. If you feel like this video is a confirmation for you, or you're learning something, or you would like to apply what I'm talking about, awesome. But don't feel any pressure to apply it, and don't feel as though I'm implying that this is the only way to work with hair in a spiritual system. So I just want to put that out there as a quick disclaimer, and now I'm going to jump right in. So from my personal perspective, I feel, and I've seen this echoed in a lot of cultures, specifically dealing with the cultures of the Indus Valley in India and various indigenous cultures in the Americas, specifically dealing with North America, that having long hair tends to increase one's reach, their antenna capability, if you will. Why is this? Because our hair is connected to our nervous system. Our hair is literally an extension of our nervous system. That's why when we feel something, and it doesn't have to be a direct reaction to skin, like temperature, like hot or cold, or pain or pleasure, it can just be sensing something near us. Our hair will stand on end. So we may sense a presence or have a feeling, good or bad, and our hair can stand on end. Our hair is what's picking up on it because it's connected to the nervous system, and it is a subtle extension of that. Now, according to the ancient Ayurvedic practices, having dreadlocks was something that somebody who had a pure ascetic path would often do, usually male. Doesn't have to be though. They would allow their hair to knot up. And in knotting it up, they viewed it much like you would view a bundle of copper wires that you would have for a television for extending that reach, or any other way that you use copper as a conductor. That is really what hair is. It is a conductor. It is for us to sample energies and subtle waves in our environment, both physically and spiritually. So that is, in a nutshell, what hair is for. And different cultures have different belief systems surrounding hair. So as I mentioned, in India, in the ancient cultures, it's not as popular anymore, but in the ancient cultures, a lot of the different types of students or mentors or teachers that were taking more of the ascetic path, meaning they were taking a path that didn't deal with materialism. They might, sit on the side of the street and meditate all day. They might rely on the kindness of strangers for food and water. They tended to have dreadlocks. You can actually see Shiva, one of the Hindu gods, having dreadlocks. According to the Ayurvedic science, they do not recommend people who are not spiritually aware and disciplined to have dreadlocks. And the reason why they say this is that it can actually clump together negative thought forms, toxic energies, even entities, things like that can get caught up in the hair, just like higher level energies. So it's very important, if you do have dreadlocks, that you do wash your dreadlocks on a regular basis. You don't wash them as much as you would regular hair, but you would wash them on a regular basis, and you would put special oils that were there to not just help the hair and the scalp, but also to protect you from those types of lower vibrations or damaging energies, and also to help you purge your own thought forms, your own negative feelings, and to wash those out as well. So it is important for us to keep our hair clean and our hair to be treated as an extension of our energy bodies or our subtle bodies. So I wanted to put that out there. Now, even with what we put in our hair, so let's say we have braids, or we have dreadlocks, or we have layers and we're just kind of adding something in there or tying something in there, right? What we put in our hair can have great spiritual significance and can either aid or work against us as well. So for example, if you're putting copper wire in your hair, that is a conductor. So if you have like a copper wire spiral or copper wire jewelry, and you have it attached to like a crystal or a symbol of some kind, or a bone or a shell, you know, that's going to amplify whatever energies are connected to that. And it's going to amplify what you are reaching out toward with your hair. So whether, you know, that is braided or dreadlocked or flowing out or however you have it. You also want to be mindful of the type of materials you put in your hair as far as absorption is concerned. So, for example, washing your hair with lots of toxins, like dyeing your hair with lots of toxins, you know, bleaching your hair too often, putting like aluminum, you know, this is really popular actually, where you see a lot of aluminum hair pieces online. Aluminum absorbed through the hair and the skin is no bueno, because it is associated with, in some cases, dementia, metal toxicity, and things of that nature. Dreadlocks go back, at least it's proven, to go back in ancient Indus Valley culture and ancient African cultures. So it also existed to a small extent in certain North and Central and South American indigenous tribes, and to a very small extent the Vikings as well. Although with all of those tribes you would see more braiding as prevalence than you would the dreadlocks, but they did also exist in those cultures. But primarily in the ancient Indian culture leading up to today, and the ancient African indigenous cultures leading up to today. Like each culture has their own way of doing it. So no, it's not identical across the board. And I wouldn't say that dreadlocks necessarily go back to one particular culture, but I will say that they are prominent in a few cultures, as far as we can tell and track back, you know, with history and mythology and things of that nature. So if you see dreadlocks showing up in some of the, you know, ancient artistic depictions, well, then there you go. There's your answer. But if you see hair that looks more flowy, or hair that's in braids, or hair that's, you know, poofed out like, you know, a fro or something like that, well, then that's your indication that that wasn't really part of that culture. So, and you can tell the difference in these depictions, you know, if you're dealing with braids or knots or long flowing hair or dreadlocks or things of that nature. It's pretty obvious when you're looking at those statues, or when you're looking at those, you know, walls or hieroglyphs or whatever you're looking at. I mean, you could tell what belonged to what culture and what was prevalent. So that would be how I would address that. So it doesn't, you know, dreadlocks does not belong to one particular culture, but there are certain cultures that it had most prominently, is what I would say. And that would be the Indian and the African cultures. So just putting that out there. Does it mean that people that aren't part of those cultures can't wear dreadlocks? No. But I'm just putting that out there as a side note. And this whole video isn't going to be about dreadlocks, guys, but I really wanted to focus on that because there is like a lot of misnomers about dreadlocks and spirituality and things of that nature. So if you have dreadlocks and you're not washing your hair, and you're leaving dreadlock wraps on for really long periods of time and stuff like that. Like, that's not healthy. Like, that's not good as far as energy flow is concerned, because the whole point of this isn't decoration. Like, if you vibe with it, awesome. But the point of it, the actual reason that people had it, was for spiritual purposes. And a lot of more postmodern archaeologists will claim that people did it because, oh, they didn't bathe or brush their hair. That's a bunch of bullshit, because there was only a few civilizations that didn't bathe. And one of them was European, where dreadlocks weren't even prominent. So I don't agree with that. If you do, that's fine, but I don't think that's what it was at all, because in fact, all of the cultures that had prominent dreadlock usage were cultures that had bathing as part of their spiritual practice and part of their daily life. So I don't agree with that. Now, some cultures would put mud or blood or ash in their hair, but again, that was for ceremonial or spiritual reasons, or in some cases for practical reasons, but they did clean their hair. It wasn't like they just walked around with a bunch of stuff on their hair all the time. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. As far as braids are concerned, braids are from all over. I mean, that's one thing. You can find different types of braids all over the earth, all over the world, in every culture at one point. There was braiding. Different types of braids, different styles, but braiding can literally be found in every single culture. And braiding usually indicated, well, first of all, there were different cultural rites behind braiding. So somebody might have a braid to represent a major event, like maybe they went through an initiation. Maybe they're grieving a death. Maybe they are a certain type of warrior, okay? So you might have one braid that you never take out for that reason. You might have, or you only take out or cut off. And with those kind of braids, you wouldn't unbraid, you would cut it. You would cut the braid. And that would signify an end to that phase, or that would signify an end to that particular, event or mourning period or things of that nature. Then you had braids that would represent different life cycles or periods. Maybe you would have braids when you got married. Maybe you would have, braids when you reached a certain age in puberty. And there would be certain styles, but they weren't like the long-term permanent braids. Now, braiding just for fashion didn't come till much later. Because remember, the ancient peoples understood the spiritual significance of braids. Sometimes hairstyles and braids, actually quite often, were also attributed to different deities and the worship or different spirits they worked with as well. So it could be honoring them by having certain colors or styles, certain hair braided, certain hair shaved in a certain way. So for example, like the Catholic monks would shave their head in a very high bowl cut, because it represented the solar ray of the sun and a halo. So that's why they did it. So, and that actually that goes back much further. That actually goes back to some of the early sun cults. So that didn't just pop up within, that came much earlier. But that would be one example there. The Native Americans would braid their hair. You would have certain tribes. It depends on the tribe, okay? So I'm not saying this goes all across the board, but in a lot of the tribes, you would have one braid to the side if you're a woman who was married, and two braids, one on each side if you're a woman who wasn't. And braiding, by the way, the act of braiding and putting a braid in was supposed to represent a consolidated thought or a consolidated goal, whereas hair flowing represented energy of the universe, of the mother, of the great spirit, sort of flowing out. When you braid something in, it's a directed purpose, okay? So I'm gonna put that out there as well. So for example, Samson in the Bible was considered a Nazarite. He had taken the Nazarite vow, which is talked about in Numbers, and it's also talked about in the New Testament as well, if you follow the Bible, if you're familiar. But the Nazarites would not eat anything from grapes, no wine, they wouldn't eat meat, and they would not cut their hair. And they were also not allowed to touch the dead either. So many have come to believe that they actually had dreadlocks because Samson was described as having only 7 dreadlocks, which is interesting because he was also considered to be very powerful and strong. The number 7 having to do with completion and strength, the 7 powers, the 7 planets. And his hair actually brought him physical strength too. So that's another example of how the ancients might have believed that the hair could bring about powers or spiritual gifts as well. So there's a very specific vow. And so that's another example. So you might have hair where you don't cut it, or you don't wash it, or you do cut it as a part of a spiritual vow. So for example, the monks in many sects of Buddhism would actually shave their hair because why? Hair represents your identity and your power and the extension of your energy into the universe. So when you're shaving your head, you're saying, okay, I'm getting rid of that egoic expression. I'm getting rid of that sense of individuality, and I'm going to be focusing on my enlightenment. And whether you're a Buddhist or not, or follow any of those more Eastern paths, you can choose to shave or cut your hair anytime you want a new beginning, especially if you have dreadlocks, or especially if you've had a certain hairstyle or a certain hair color for a length of time that might have represented an aspect of you that you no longer associate with, or you no longer vibe with, or maybe an aspect of you that you want to shed. So we can grow hair out long to increase our antenna reach of receiving and sending out energy, or being a conduit, but we can also cut or shave our hair if we want to get rid of dead ends or dead energy, or just something that we feel doesn't any longer represent who we are. This is also why when nations are conquered, they would shave the heads of those they conquered, because it was symbolic of taking away their identity and their power. A lot of them were then reintegrated into society within that nation that did the conquering. So then they were either considered slaves, indentured servants, or they had to become citizens of that nation, sometimes all three. And so that was a whole process of breaking down their previous identity. This was common in the transatlantic slave trade, where they would shave the heads of all the slaves, female and male, as a part of removing that spiritual power, that connection to their ancestors, and that sense of identity. And so they also, because dreadlocks were so prominent and they knew that dreadlocks were part of the culture, that was also another reason why those were shaved off, as well as the braids as well. This is also why during the slave trade, once the slaves were already there and in slavery, they were often encouraged to keep their heads shaved or to have head coverings on for the same reason. So I want to just put that out there as well. The Rastafarians were actually trying to take on the Nazarite vow as an expression, a part of that later culture, and that attempt to return those particular lost tribes of Israel back to those original Nazarite vows within the context of that particular belief system. Now, I want to go back to like the Vikings for a second as well too. A lot of the Vikings did not wear dreadlocks, which is a common misconception. The majority of them did not. Also, I want to say real quick that not all Vikings were white. Many of them were black. I'm not saying they were all black, but a lot of them were. And those particular Vikings were almost completely erased from history, except for a few of the tales. So I just want to put that out there as well. So how the Vikings wore their hair, it was typically like, for the men, it was typically like a tellum or a reverse mullet, where it's sort of shaved in the back and longer in the front. They would have one side shaved or both sides shaved, or they would have like long shoulder length hair. They would braid them in certain designs going back. The women would typically wear their hair braided back or in buns, especially if they were doing any kind of farming or any kind of labor work, but even the shield maidens as well. So that was more indicative of how they did their hair. It wasn't like dreadlocks and stuff to a large extent like a lot of people think. So just putting that out there. I also want to address real quick the topic of hair coverings or head coverings, since we've gone into, tending to the hair, having hair long or short or shaven or braided or dreaded or knotted and all of that. I want to now go into the importance of head or hair coverings as well. The reason why certain cultures, and this is both men and women. Now, it is more common for women to wear head coverings than men, but it is also common for men to wear head coverings as well. Why? Because it protects the crown chakra and the third eye chakra, right? So whether or not those cultures understand that, whether or not that has been lost to them, that was really the main reason initially was for spiritual protection and also protection from the weather and the elements. Then it grew to expand out into religious reasons, reasons of modesty, reasons of station or hierarchy. But originally this was supposed to be representing the whole crown or the crown chakra and protecting that from unwanted energies, so you wouldn't have your head uncovered during certain times of day, certain times at night, or around certain people or in certain areas. So you can also use, there is a popularity of veiling where, especially among women, but it can also be done among men, where you actually cover your hair for that same reason. So if your hair is a bunch of antennas, right? And you don't want, let's say you want to retreat back and you don't want to be picking up all kinds of signals, right? Aside from creating an energetic shield around yourself, you can also cover your head, and that will really subdue those energies. So it provides a level of protection and separation between you and the external energies around you. Is it going to just block everything out? No. But in fact, it just helps you tune in more or focus your energy more in one direction instead of having it just out there tapping in and sampling all the energies around. So that's really the purpose of that as well. I also wanted to talk about body hair real quick, guys. So hair on the face for men, hair on the body for men and women. This was also part of, not only does it help with antennas as well on that level, but also it helps regulate your lymphatic system as well, and your hormones and your pheromones. So this whole pressure of having to shave body hair or shave face hair really is more of a recent thing. Yes, there have been different types of cultures and time periods where shaving has become popular, mostly for men. But to be honest, women shaving their legs or shaving their arms or shaving their vulvas or any of those areas, they did pluck their eyebrows since the time of Egypt, and possibly before then. But as far as the other shaving is concerned, that did not take place primarily until the World War, where Gillette, I think is how it's pronounced, that particular brand, was trying to sell razors. And because all the men were at war, they then had to change their market and target women. So they started to talk about how, when the men come back from war, they're going to want to come back to a hairy woman that's like a man and all this other shit, and really started shaming women into shaving. So I want to say too, if you ever feel like you either want to shave your whole body for whatever reason of purification, or you want to stop shaving your whole body, or you want to stop cutting your hair, or you want to cut your hair, go with the flow on that. Because there are reasons for this stuff, but it should never be this compulsory, I have to fit into society type situation. It should always be based on what you internally feel guided to do for whatever reason, because there is cycles and changes behind things. Also, from what I've heard, there are certain moon cycles that it's best for you to cut your hair if you are going to cut your hair. Now, I want to say that the people of India would say that you want to comb your hair with a wooden comb, and you don't want to do it when it's wet because that breaks your hair. So they believe in, if you do not have dreadlocks, or you don't have like box braids or cornrows or anything like that, or you do but you take them out a lot, anytime you're combing your hair, brushing your hair, it should not be with the plastic or metal. It should be with wood, because this is neutral to the electromagnetic charge of your hair. So it doesn't cause static electricity, and it also doesn't take from that energy as well. And they also recommend that you massage natural oils into your scalp and hair on a regular basis as well. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now, I am somebody that definitely dyes and bleaches my hair more than I probably should, but I have done it for reasons that I felt were more of an inward expression, or felt pulled to do at different times for different reasons. And so again, going back to how, regardless of what you do with your hair and what practice you follow, I would say just follow your inner guidance on that, and your inner intuition, and just be mindful of the effect how you treat your hair has on your spiritual journey. So that's what I got for you guys. I hope that it resonated with you. Definitely take what resonates and leave the rest. If you have any relevant questions to this that you felt weren't answered in this video, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. And I might decide to do a follow-up video on that. Take care. Check out my website, thetantricdragoness.com, to book a private akashic reading or any other reading. Also, akashic portraits, consultations, shamanic journeys, starseed charts, primordial dragon fire healing, and much more. You can also subscribe to Patreon to learn how to do a lot of this yourself through various templates I've designed. Activate Diamond Consciousness, Activate the Black Flame, Journey the Underworld, Tantric Healing and BDSM, Astral Projection and Power, Shields, Cloaks, Wards, Learning Light Language, Exclusive and Premier Readings, Soul Fragment Retrieval, Advanced Ancestral Work, Creating Your Own Shamanic Sanctuary, and much more. Thanks for your support, and stay tuned for future videos.